I'm here.
Hey, brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody. And as was said there, it's unfortunate Councillor Jeffries hasn't been able to attend. And about 2 minutes before this meeting was due to start, I was asked to chair it. So you're going to have to forgive me for any shortcomings. And please just hang in there and be patient. Hopefully, I can get everybody in and I can see everybody on my screen. So hopefully, if there's any hands up or anything, I should be able to pick that up. So I have been asked just to make a statement. So due to the rise in the COVID-19 cases in the UK and the current uncertainty this brings, the decision was taken not to hold any in-person committee meetings in January 2022, which has included the meeting today. Unfortunately, we are not permitted to hold virtual formal committee meetings at this time. Regulations permitting this earlier in the pandemic expired in May 2021 and have not been renewed by government. The meeting today is therefore an informal consultative meeting of the Place, Regeneration and Housing Committee. However, it is being live streamed to enable the public and stakeholders to observe and hear the debate and discussion, and papers have been published in the usual way. Where there is a need for a formal decision on an item, it will be necessary for the Managing Director to exercise his delegated authority and subsequently take those decisions having regard to the recommendations of this meeting. Hopefully everybody got that, and that's all okay. So if we just click off with the agenda items then. So starting with apologies for absence. So obviously Councillor Jeffries is not able to attend, Councillor Helen Hayden and Councillor Darren Byford also we've received apologies for. The second one is declaration for any interests. So if anybody's got any interest they want to declare. Yeah, Helen.
Hi, not directly, but I suppose out of probity as chair of West Yorkshire Housing Partnership on, I think it's item 6, capital spending, the Brownfield Housing Fund bids. So just being belt and braces and declaring an interest of the partnership in those.
Brilliant, thank you. And then item 3, exempt information. So I'm assuming that that's been read, but Helen Lennon and myself are exempt excluded from that information, and that information wouldn't be presented in this meeting today. So that wouldn't be those are exempt. So that brings me on to the minutes of the meeting of our last meeting on the 25th of November. Can everybody confirm that they meet with their approval? Yeah. Okay, that's excellent. And that then brings us on to the bulk of this agenda, which is then the Getting Building Fund update. Is that going to be Melanie? Will that be you?
Yeah, so just to introduce the item, Chair, thank you. So we have got the Getting Building Fund, which is one of the funds from government that needs to be complete by the end of March. And we have 15 projects in this programme. We've done a review regularly of the programme to see where we are in terms of ensuring that we get a full spend on this programme and deliver the outputs. I've got Rob Tranmer on, who is the programme manager. Rob, do you just want to give us a very brief overview of where we are with the programme and some of the headlines?
Yeah, sure, thank you, Melanie. As Melanie said, the financial close of the programme in March 22, but most projects, or a large number of them, will continue beyond the financial year using match funding from their other sources, their own funding or money they've levered in. All outputs for the projects must be achieved by December 24. Of the 15 projects that were approved at strategic outline case, most projects now have a full approval. The total approvals to date amount to 45.24 million of the 52.6 million, with further approvals of 6.443 forecast to be approved by the end of March, a significant part of which is the Bradford One City Park project. The approval for 5.6 million is expected this week under delegations, which will almost bring us to the total. And programme costs of 917,000 have also been approved, including provision for an overhead recovery charge. The number of homes insulated by Wakefield Warm Homes and Holbeck Victorian Terrace retrofit projects is expected to achieve the target, which is very good news. The Corn Exchange and Meadow Lane works for the Leeds City Council Greater Green project will be completed soon, and the works to provide a new bridge named after David Oluwale have started. Work is well underway on a new market, the Bradford City Village project, and the Bradford 1 City Park is due to start. The report says in March, but in fact that will be in May, just a slight change to that. But the contractor is expected to be appointed in March. Works to strip out the Dewsbury Arcade and the Huddersfield George Hotel have completed, and the designs for the further refurbishments are underway. The Wakefield Gigabit Voucher Scheme project has been affected by the unexpected launch of an extension to the National Gigabit Broadband Voucher Scheme from April 2021. When this project was conceived, there was an understanding that that programme would end, but that project was subsequently extended. So unfortunately, the Wakefield scheme will have limited impact because most people tend to see the national scheme when they're looking for support for this initiative. And funding arrangements are in place for most schemes, with a further grant funding agreements due to be signed in the next few weeks. So I think with that, I'll open it to questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robert. And are there any questions there? Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. And thank you to officers for the report. I suppose the question for me is, what have we learned, really? This was the first in some ways of the shovel-ready schemes, terribly tight timescales, very quick process. What have we learned so far that we can actually put into action for the other schemes that we know are coming down the line? Thank you.
Yeah, Melanie.
Yeah, Chair, if I could come in on this one, I think one of the things that we have learned is, where schemes are almost ready to go, we have enough information to consider the full business case with the final costs. So yes, we have a number of approval stages that we go through in our assurance process. And if we've got all the information, we don't have to go through them all sequentially. We can actually go straight to the final approval point because we have sufficient information to do that. Now, interestingly, some of them, while they thought that they were at that full business case stage, when they came in for submission, it was at an outline case. And then we've been able to gather the information to then finalise that case. So we have learnt that we can be flexible with the approval process. The other thing that we've learned is, however shovel ready we believe our schemes are, there are always lots of issues that crop up at the end and have made it very challenging to deliver these schemes within the time frame. Now, government have confirmed that if schemes are in contract, they can carry over into the next quarter in next year, and we can use our freedoms and flexibilities as a combined authority to make sure that the spend has occurred by the end of March, but actually then we use match funding and other funding sources to see the projects through. So I think one of the lessons learned is that we can speed up those approvals, but the other one is that it is very, very difficult to deliver full infrastructure schemes in a very short period of time, and we need a longer leading time.
Brilliant, thanks. Could I just ask a question that I think sort of related to that, really? And this was really in relation to the Holbeck Phase 2 retrofit scheme. I mean, given that a lot of the housing stock across this sort of region does require retrofit, and given that this is a problem that we've got everywhere, what are the lessons that can be learned from how it's been done here? And I think what I'm particularly interested in is where you've got different types of tenure, because if you've got a landlord who is progressive and goes along with all this and has it done, then that's very good. But if you have a landlord who isn't, then you may end up being missed out from it. And if it's council, then so you can almost have this hit and miss type of effect. And so I'd be interested to know how that one was administered and what lessons maybe we can draw from that for elsewhere across the region.
Yeah, if I could come in, Chair. Generally, the take-up has been very good. And in all of these retrofit schemes that we do, that the take-up is usually pretty high. That the biggest challenge for us is that we have a massive amount of stock that we need to look at in terms of retrofit. And the funding is very small relative to the amount of stock. And that's one of the biggest challenges. And then how do we upscale to a significant level and significant volume to really start to tackle some of this? And it's unfunded, and at the moment we don't have the immediate capacity there to step up and do this on a really big scale. So we tend to pick schemes where we can do this at a very localized area, where it's one street or two streets, and generally tend to get that buy-in because it's at a very, very local level.
I was wondering whether it's possible to explore things like sustainable finance as a means of being able to do something on an area-based approach, and maybe with the energy savings to service that debt. I don't know if there's anything like that can be worked out, so that there's almost a private sector solution that could be applied. I don't know, it was just something that I was thinking about.
We could certainly have a look at that.
Yeah.
We could certainly take that back.
Brilliant, excellent. And Helen, see your hands up.
Thanks, Mia. Yes, the partnership, West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, we've put a joint bid in with the Combined Authority to BAYS for some decarbonisation funding, which we haven't heard about yet. It was supposed to be announced in December, but I think it's now supposed to be this month. And that's the approach that we're trying to take, is at a neighbourhood level, because that's where you'll get the economies of scale to actually do something in a locality. And we're also exploring an energy generation scheme, again, at a neighbourhood level, which may well be self-funding ultimately. It might take 30 years to be self-funding, but it may ultimately be that way. But I absolutely agree, Melanie, there is insufficient funding and policy guidance from central government at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what's really important, I think, is that area-based approach. I think that's really powerful, because I think you can start to then drive momentum behind it, and there's other people that can come on board once it's kind of recognised in a particular area. So are there any more questions on that agenda item? If not, then I think we can move on to, and thank you very much everybody that was involved in putting that together. And then on to agenda item 6, capital spending and project approvals.
Yeah, Chair, we have 5 projects for consideration today. The first 2 of those are through the Transforming Cities Fund. Fiona Lim is going to take us through those 2.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon. So the first one is a Hetman White bus hub project. As Melanie said, this forms part of the Transforming Cities Programme. The scheme will significantly improve the facilities and the waiting environment for bus passengers at Hetman White bus hub. It's beyond the site of the existing hub, but it'll also increase the capacity for buses using the hub through an additional stands, which will in turn reduce the delay for buses entering and exiting the hub. The project will in essence deliver a new bus station at the location, which is only currently served by standard stops and shelters. The new bus station will include a waiting room, new real-time information, and also more recently an addition of a toilets and a changing places location. That's been added to the design more recently since the public consultation, following feedback from the consultation on those points. It will also include an office and bus driver facilities, and it's indicated that Arriva will likely take this on and will be responsible for managing the bus station during operating hours. The building was also designed to include a number of low carbon features, such as low energy heating and lighting, solar panels, sustainable urban drainage facilities, planting, and a green roof and green wall. The project forms part of the wider improvements to buses in the area and is complemented by the planned improvements along the A628 corridor, which will provide bus priority and improve access to the bus network through improved footways and crossing points. The package of improvements will help to make the bus a more attractive and feasible option for people accessing jobs, education services within Kirklees. The project is seeking approval at outline business case stage, and whilst the BCR has been calculated as low, there are clear strategic drivers for this publicly supported project to progress. The value of the scheme is £4.97 million, which will be funded through the Transforming Cities Programme. This amount also includes an element of carbon mitigation funding that comes through the programme and will be spent on those items I've noted previously. This is a small increase on the previous funding allocated to the project, is to take into consideration the new scope of the toilets, which will be of benefit to the town in its wider sense. A further £328,000 is requested at this time and is recommended for approval to take the project forward to the full business case. Key risks of the scheme have been identified around the lack of support for the scheme, including planning requirements. The planning application is currently being prepared and will be taken forward during the next stage. Kirklees have committed to take on the ongoing liability for maintenance and operation of the facility overall, with it's likely, as I mentioned, Arriva taking on those leasing arrangements. But they continue to work with the Combined Authorities Facilities and Assets team on this aspect of the project as it moves forward to the full business case. The project is expected to be completed by July 2023. The recommendations are, therefore, that the project proceeds through decision point 3 and starts work on full business case. An indicative approval of £4,970,541 and development costs are approved of £328,000, and the Combined Authority enters into a funding agreement with Kirklees for this amount. And that future approvals are as per the assurance pathway set out in the report, with a delegation to Managing Director at full business case and Director of Delivery at approval to proceed.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Fiona. That's very clear to see. There's a lot of work's gone into that, so fantastic. I'll just open up first for any questions, if anybody else has any questions. No. I was wondering whether I could ask something on this. It was really to do with, well, there's a few things really, but the benefit to cost ratio, it seems like there's a formula that's set out, and I know you've explained that these low ratios have been accepted, but it seems as a body that is out to sort of oversee this sort of thing, there's a lot of projects which appear to be low, and I was wondering if you could just explain the rationale behind having a formula that sets out this framework, and we're accepting that it's low and that's okay. Yeah.
Sure, I can give a little bit of background to that. So in essence, we're required to follow the Department of Transport's economic appraisal guidance, which is known as the TAG guidance. And that's a national matrix that tends to value things like journey time improvements as higher than necessarily kind of amenity and facility improvements. So generally, when it comes to station improvement schemes, these don't tend to score as favourably as perhaps a corridor improvement scheme that will improve journey times for a range of modes. However, as we know, it's all very well just putting bus priority on corridors, but actually we need the facilities to be welcoming to all users, as well as the service being reliable and effective and efficient. So it's all part of the wider strategic case for making the bus network as a whole attractive and used by as many people as possible.
And does government support this view? So if we were applying for funding in this area again, would they look back at this and say, well, previously you didn't score very highly on this? I mean, is that something that would penalise us in the future?
I think on that respect, I think we need to do as much as we can in terms of the evaluation of the projects once they've been delivered, and ask the right questions of the users to get that value recorded, and really demonstrate that they are of benefit to the community.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Jane Scullion in, and then Melanie, come to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're in some ways still in a transitional period in this, and we have looked at some schemes that have got a lower BCR, and I think the officers are always very clear in terms of saying this is about place and this is about our environmental pledges, and we're constantly having to balance these, and you see the government beginning to transition around those things. And I think here in West Yorkshire we're actually very clear about the environmental benefits of public transport unless we really get this right. You know, environmental things will suffer and the economy will suffer, and we'll just be completely clogged up with traffic congestion. Yes. And I speak with some knowledge of Heckmond-Wike bus station, because I got the bus from Dewsbury to Cleckheaton the other day, and it spent some time in Heckmond-Wike bus station, which is itself quite cramped and congested. And I think the work, as long as it is done in the way that's being discussed, I think the work will actually be a real enhancement to the town. Thank you.
No, thank you. I agree. I think it's just about how it's evaluated and how it's explained. I think that's the key thing. Yeah, sorry, Melanie.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come back in on the TAG appraisal route. So, I mean, it is the economic appraisal route that's been favoured by DfT for some time, and it has traditionally favoured the motorist, so that benefits to the motorist of reducing journey times are rewarded in that cost-benefit ratio. And actually, strategically, we are moving to a push towards public transport and active travel. So we are trying to encourage people to increase that patronage on buses and trains and use the bike and walk to work or training opportunities or education. And that doesn't necessarily score very high in the BCR. So we do have some of these schemes that are lower, and the Treasury has reviewed the Green Book and has said that the strategic benefits of schemes will be recognised, so that if the BCR is low, you can look at the strategic fit, and if it is a strategic priority to move away from car usage, which it is for us and nationally, then we are able to balance that BCR against a more significant score, if you like, in terms of the strategic fit. So we've done that in this case, and yes, it is low, but you will see that the schemes that are promoting public transport and active travel do tend to score lower.
Right, that's brilliant. That's really helpful to understand all that. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions anybody else has? I do have one more, just on the evaluation stage, on 4.13 in that evaluation section. I was just wondering that I understand we've got this housing dashboard being produced, and whether the values of properties that are being recorded and analysed across the region could somehow be brought into this analysis, because I think that if we can start to demonstrate the value improvements around this, and whether that's a measure, whether it goes here or somewhere else, but if there's a way of us tracking that improvement, I think that's a really powerful leverage tool to be able to then drive private sector investment into those areas. So I think if it was possible to do that, then I think that would be really helpful. Melanie, go for it.
Yeah, Chair, I think that's a really good point. And what we have set out for previous programmes is that we've defined the areas of impact for these schemes. So we are putting investment into areas and localities, and actually there could be a knock-on effect of other investment on adjacent sites through some of those localities. So we do want to capture some of those benefits of the schemes, and as a result of the investment that we're putting in as well. So it's a good point to look at the land values and the property values, and we'll certainly feed that back to the team as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
This is an integral part of a £13 million investment, Cleckheaton to Dewsbury, and there's a range of measures to encourage improved bus services, walking, cycling, and so on. And this is part of the total fit. It is an improvement to the bus station, but in Kirklees, there are 3 bus stations which are being upgraded at the moment, and they're going to make a really big difference. So, I mean, the case has been evaluated at least 3 times that I can remember.
That's great. Thank you. And Sam, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks. This is my first meeting, so this is all really useful background for me. Thank you. It's all really comprehensive. I can see that Transforming Cities programme is about moving people out of their cars and encouraging walking and cycling. I'm wondering strategically as well, and I'm wondering what the value of this is in the Green Book, of using our public transport development strategically to engage with people, our underserved communities, you know, people who could benefit from being able to move around the place and region more easily to access training or, you know, or work or skills opportunities. And are we thinking about working with our place partners about how, you know, how we can do some of that?
Melanie, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll come back in. Thank you, Chair. I couldn't get to the hand up button quick enough.
You're in my line of sight.
Yes. So, I mean, the sponsors are looking at how to make these schemes as inclusive as possible and how to reach the widest possible groups in terms of determining the design of the scheme. So in terms of the consultation and engagement, we will look at reaching the widest possible groups, and we'll report that back in the consultation report. It has been more difficult with COVID because we've done the consultations online, but you know, we will have the opportunity soon, hopefully, to start to do some face-to-face consultations. And we have looked at other ways. We've done leaflet drops to tell people that things are happening in their area. So yeah, it's a good point, and we're trying to make the designs and the end solution as user-friendly as possible and to make more people want to use the bus. We also have some funding separately to look at travel behaviour. So we are looking at promoting public transport and active travel, and we've got separate funding through the DFT to look at that. So it's not one without the other. We do need the capital infrastructure, but actually the behavioural change element is so important if we're going to actually get people to change their mode of travel. So it's a bit of a combination of the two.
I think just to reinforce that as well is the new government's white paper on health and social care, and we're doing some work with Well North Enterprises and Lord Mawson, and he's been working on an amendment, but essentially it's all centred on sort of the whole sort of sense of health and social care is based on this idea of place-based integrated sort of things. And so I think the things that sort of Sam was referring to in terms of making those connections, I think would be really interesting to see geospatially, where you can actually sort of see what's within an area, what are the organizations and who are the beneficiaries, and you know, as places are linked up, how then people can potentially access more within that. So I think that geospatial analysis of what's within each kind of cluster of things and how it might overlap, and I think then if that then fits in with the government's white paper on health, then I think it starts to fit with that agenda as well. Cool. So I think if there's no more questions, I think we can move on to agenda item 7.
Well, there's a number of items in here for consideration. So the second one of the capital approvals is also another TCF scheme, which Fiona was going to take us through. So this is the Selby Station Gateway, and then I'll ask other officers to come in to talk about the other projects as well.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one, as we mentioned, is Selby Station Gateway. And again, this is formed part of the Transforming Cities programme and is funded through the programme, but also some local match funding being brought by Selby Council and North Yorkshire County Council. The project will see the redevelopment of Selby Station Gateway with new facilities and enhanced bus rail interchange facilities. The scheme will also deliver significant improvements to access to the station for those arriving by foot, by bike, or by bus, with the project comprising of 3 distinct elements. The first being the station gateway itself, which will provide a new entrance and waiting area, enhancements to the station road, including cycle lanes, widened footways and crossing points, reconfiguration of the parking and taxi drop-off area to create a new bus hub and reduce vehicle dominance at the entrance to the station. The Eastern Station access will provide, and the Cowie Drive car park will provide a new rail station entrance, enhanced footways, new crossing points and improved wayfinding. There will be a new car park with electric vehicle charging and improvements for networks, rails, operations and safety. The Ousegate corridor, which will provide segregated cycle lanes, reconfiguration of the traffic flows and car parking, additional pedestrian crossings and improvements to footways and traffic calming. The scheme will also provide enhanced greenery and placemaking in the area, supporting carbon reduction and improving air quality, which will be achieved through a shift from car use to walking, cycling and public transport. The scheme will support planned housing in the area by providing links to the rail station and from development sites. Whilst, as we've discussed in the previous item, the scheme's benefit to cost ratio has been assessed as poor, this is mainly attributed to the scheme's potential impact on general traffic. So essentially the assessment has shown that they would likely see rerouting of traffic around the town. However, this should be mitigated if the scheme achieves its uptake in sustainable travel as planned. The total value of the scheme is £22.5 million, which will be funded through 20.5 from the Transforming Cities programme and 2.406 million from Selby and North Yorkshire County Council. This is a higher contribution from the Combined Authority than expected at the SOC stage previously, but it is to account for a more robust approach to risk and contingency, as well as the more complex requirements identified through the planning process. The scheme is at outline business case stage, and the following risks have been identified and are being actively managed. Scheme delay. The promoter has already appointed a continuing development partner and progressed several activities at risk during the outline business appraisal period. They are working with a contractor on early contractor involvement to shore up the programme in more detail and understand how the project will be delivered on site. And they're also looking at opportunities to bring items forward, as well as working closely with Network Rail to manage any risks associated with the rail interface. The next risk is around scheme costs and inflation and material costs. The promoter is working through value engineering options, including the choices of materials as the design process continues. The scheme does require planning approval, and a planning application has been submitted along with a full environmental impact assessment. This environmental impact assessment has not identified any significant impact that is likely to need substantial mitigation or impact on the progression of the scheme. This is how the planning application and the environmental impact assessment has happened during the appraisal and approval period. So this is an update to the report that's in the pack. And it's expected that planning will be determined in March this year. The scheme has undertaken 2 rounds of public consultation, and there is overall support for the proposals. The promoter will continue to work with key stakeholders on the detailed designs of the proposals to ensure that the support is retained. Selby and North Yorkshire County Council have continued to work at risk through the outline business appraisal and approval period, and have recently secured all land required to progress the scheme, putting the scheme in a good position to progress with its more transformational option. The scheme has also received approval from North Yorkshire County Council's executive to progress to the Highways Authority. So the recommendations are that the scheme proceeds through decision point 3 and work commences on full business case. An indicative approval to the Combined Authority's contribution of £20,502,216 and full approval to the further development costs to complete a full business case, which is £1,934,000. The committee is also asked to consider the approval of further development costs to undertake land purchase and enabling works of £2,135,000. However, this is not to be approved in full at this stage, but delegated to the Director of Delivery following the discharge of conditions outlined in the report. Linked to this, the Combined Authority will enter into a grant funding agreement addendum, and the future approvals are in line with those set out in the report. Now, there's a list of conditions in the report that require a further progress report to be brought forward by March this year on key risks identified, and these include the environmental impact assessment, stakeholder acceptability, and further work on the details of those potential disbenefits to general traffic.
That's brilliant, Fiona. Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? No, that's all good. Can I just ask, in terms of the cost increases, I'm assuming that's going to be something that's going to affect all of these projects. So is that a process that they all go through to review the materials, review the scope of it and so on?
Yes. Yes, all projects are asked to review scope, materials, and the costs and the robustness of those costs at all stages. Later on the agenda, we've got a full programme review report on the Transforming Cities programme that gives a little bit more detail about that process. There is a programme held risk and contingency pot at present, and that's we're in the process of allocating that funding out to the schemes as they come forward through the assurance process.
Brilliant. Melanie?
Yeah, so I was just going to add, in terms of the Transforming Cities Fund, yes, there is a risk pot that is held at programme level. So as projects are coming through, if we've got more confidence in the figures but the costs have increased, yes, we are looking at value engineering wherever possible, but generally costs can be contained within the programme. For some of our programmes that have been running longer, we didn't hold a programme risk pot. And actually there's more and more pressure on some of those programmes. So what we're going to do for the next meeting or for a future meeting is bring forward a review of each of our programmes and have a look at this. So I think next time we'll be looking at Transport Fund, and I think the LITIC Fund as well, the Leeds Public Transport Investment Programme, which is just drawing to a close. So the plan is that we'll bring the review and we'll have a look at that. But it may be that in the longer term, as everything starts to come through, we certainly hadn't accounted for inflation of 20%. And actually on some of these schemes, that we can demonstrate that inflation is running at 20%.
Yeah.
So it is something that hasn't been factored into the funding. We are looking at value engineering, and we have an eye on this, as you know, we're keeping control of the programme costs. But for TCF, we do have the benefit of a programme risk pot, which is being used as schemes come forward.
Yeah, great. Otherwise, you could find that some of them are just going to end up not being able to progress. So that's and just one other thing. There was a point at the beginning of the agenda item regarding sort of how COVID evaluation or post-COVID, if we ever get to that point, is sort of being evaluated as part of every sort of project. And is that something that takes place formally, or is that just something that happens in the background somewhere? Melanie?
As part of the appraisal, Chair, we will consider pre-COVID levels and what we believe the demand is going to be post-COVID. But on a lot of these schemes, this is medium to longer term investment. So we are expecting the usage to be back to pre-COVID levels and beyond once we've completed the schemes. And actually maybe this is a better time to complete the schemes if passenger numbers are down a little bit at the moment in the short term.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So the next one.
Yeah, so we've got the Leeds City Centre package, and this is the Leeds City Square plus elements of that package. And James Bennett is going to take us through this one.
Brilliant.
Hi.
James, hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the intro. So yeah, thanks. I'm here to talk about the paper in front of you is the City Square scheme, and this falls within Leeds City Centre package of works. The main aim of the scheme is the closure of City Square itself to through traffic, however, while still retaining bus, taxi and cycle access. So the overall objectives of the scheme are to improve connectivity and safety for those on foot and bike, and to improve bus reliability, making it more attractive to catch public transport, walk and cycle. Just to mention a stat which always catches my eye, so I hope you find it interesting as well. At 30% of traffic that passes through City Square has no origin or destination in the city centre, and it has been used for many years as a key through route coming from somewhere to somewhere, but not the city centre. So the really big strategic aim of this project is to put that traffic on the right road, which is the strategic road network, and not going right through the very city centre where it's very heavily pedestrianised. So you want to get those cars out of the city centre if they've got no purpose to be there. This is one of those schemes which is similar to the discussion that you had on Heckman White bus station, and I'm really pleased that I've come second for once. So it's good to come second because you get all the debate and sort of pre-text as being given that this definitely falls into, because it benefits pedestrians, bus users and walkers. It's got a slightly negative BCR, and under the DFT's original terms of BCR, benefit cost ratio, it's got a poor value for money, which isn't something I'd want to sit here in front of you all and say, I'm bringing a scheme that's got a poor value of money against the DFT's criteria. But as the previous discussion mentioned, and as Melanie put really clearly, in the DFT's Green Book, motorists have always been valued higher than, say, pedestrians or walkers or cyclists. And displacing cars from City Square, whilst they have to make a small extra journey to miss out City Square, numerically there's a lot of cars. So in the economic appraisal, that means that it has a big impact, even though on each individual motorist it's small, but there's lots of them. So it has a big impact, and motorists are always valued higher than pedestrians and cyclists. So on the face of it, it's got a poor value for money. However, as we discussed earlier, it's the strategic case which is really strong on this scheme. And if you don't view it in pure isolation, a lot of the city centre package works that have come before at meetings such as this, and the work that's underway, such as at Armley, have been to enable this scheme. So I think we're in this Jubilee year. So for Leeds, I'd say that this is the jewel in the crown of all the schemes that have come before. So it enables the opening up of City Square as an event space. For example, for the forthcoming City of Culture in 2023, it'll allow future proofing for the mass transit route through City Square in the centre of Leeds, and it moves that through traffic out onto the strategic road network where it should be. There's really big positive impacts for pedestrians, cyclists and bus users. A couple of stats that I found when I was preparing for this morning. For bus users, there's a reduction in delays through this area by 15 to 25%. That's a reduction in the delays that currently exist. And also, there's an 11% improvement in journey speeds through this area. So overall, there's really big benefits, pedestrians, cyclists, and bus users. The cost of the scheme at OBC is £15.3 million. The CA is being asked to fund £6.4 million. At this point in time, the approval that's come forward is to ask to progress the scheme from decision point 3 outline business case to work on the FBC. Leeds aren't asking for any additional money just to do that, because they're hoping to bring back the FBC very soon. But the total cost of the scheme will be £6.4 million of CA funding. Thanks.
That's brilliant. Sounds great. Are there any comments or questions? Helen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that excellent evaluation of the scheme. I would just add about the air quality advantages that we will get in the city centre from taking through traffic out of city centre, and this area, Dark Neville Street, etc., is the worst possibly in the country. So for air quality, so it will really improve. And those 30% of journeys that have no destination or starting point in the city centre, and that taxis as well will be able to go, hackney carriages will be able to go through city centre, through City Square as well as buses, and of course, and it'll be much safer for cyclists and walkers, and give us a real gateway to the a really impressive gateway to the city. And for people like me who have my wedding reception in the Queen's Hotel, you won't have to go across 4 lanes of traffic to take your pictures in your wedding dress. So, but there were good pictures once I got across the road, or roads. So, yeah, I'm really thankful for the committee today for the consideration on this, and just put into the mix about the air quality improvements in this really congested part of the city. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just talking about that, I think there was a sculpture sort of thing that was put into City Square there with sort of 1 ton of carbon, was it? I think it was
Yeah.
sort of shown, and it was like this massive block, and you sort of, God, it was really illustrative. Sort of
Yeah, when you actually see it.
Yeah,
in really tangible terms like that. Yeah.
It was really good. Excellent. Are there any more comments or questions on that? No. Excellent, James. That was really good. It was really good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And so the next one then, Brownfield Housing Fund for Pontefract, is that right?
Yeah, so we've got 2 Brownfield Housing Fund schemes. There's one here for Castleford and one for Pontefract, and Patricia Davey is going to take us through these 2.
Thank you, Melanie. So the Brownfield Housing Fund Castleford scheme is at OBC stage, and due to commercial sensitivities, the majority of the papers are exempt. The OBC is seeking support from the Brownfield Housing Fund to assist in the creation of 69 affordable homes. It is anticipated that the homes will be a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroomed homes, with 52 at affordable to rent and 17 at shared ownership. It is located in an area where there is high demand for both affordable rent and affordable shared ownership. The investment as it currently stands represents an acceptable value for money under the terms of the fund by MHCLG, now DLUC, and it is recommended for approval to proceed through decision point 3, outline business case, and to commence work on activity 4, full business case.
That's brilliant, Patricia. Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Now, I mean, I would just add, sort of following on from things that I've said before, really on this, and that's just this idea of where we do have 100% sort of affordable homes, that the context within that they sit within is considered, because I think if they are, and I'm not saying I don't know about in this case, but if they are in areas of deprivation with high levels of sort of people living in deprived accommodation, and then we build more that doesn't actually transform or change that place, I think that this money could end up being wasted. And I think that's just something that needs to be borne in mind with where there are 100% affordable schemes, depending on what that context is that they're around, that surround them. So, Helen.
Hi, thanks, Amir. I expect you'd expect me to say I wouldn't say wasted.
No, no, maybe wrong choice of words.
I mean, there is a very high demand for affordable housing, and those considerations are taken into account at the point of designing a scheme. And mixed tenure is part of the kind of approach that we take. So as you see, there's low cost home ownership as part of that mix.
Yeah.
So, and obviously the mayor's got a pledge for 5,000 homes. So it's very important that we actually do make sure that we make progress against that, because there are already challenges that we know about in terms of land and planning delays. So wherever we can make progress, I think I would recommend that we do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, I agree. I think what it is really the fact that if we are going to really leverage change in places, I think we need to have a really place-based approach that has a transforming effect. And I think ultimately the real gain, in my view, is if it becomes commercially viable for the private sector to be able to develop houses of which a percentage are affordable. And I think once it becomes financially viable for them to do that, then I think it then ends up in a situation where we end up with far more development. Whereas I think we've got a lot of places within our region where it's totally not viable to build, and very few people are interested in building there, and very few people are actually interested in even living there. And you can see it in the values. And so you can find that you might put £4 million, for example, into a development which might create X number of units, which is fine for those people that move into those units, but it hasn't necessarily done anything to transform the wider area or create a context that's allowed the area to uplift on the back of sort of that development you kind of see in the more developed parts of the region. So it's that consideration that I'm trying to sort of get across really. Sam, sorry, and then Melanie, I'll come back to you.
Thanks. I just want to build on what Amir said about the importance of regenerating place, really, because in addition to what Amir's just said, there's also, you know, my question is, what can we do, or what are we doing beyond the new homes that we're building to create, you know, to create a good, clean space for people to, you know, to live in, and to be able to, you know, for kids to be able to play out, for people to be able to store their bikes so that they can use the new active travel routes, you know, all that kind of thing. You know, and I will be asking some naive questions because I'm still learning about this, so please forgive me. But what are the things that we are or we can be doing around creating good lives for people who, you know, who can take on these homes?
That's a very good point. Melanie, I don't know if you want to come back in on that and your other question.
This is actually what I was going to make a comment about, because often these investments are not in isolation. That there's a package of interventions here in these localities. We're looking at place-based regeneration. So we might have, you know, an active travel scheme alongside a brownfield housing scheme and a getting building fund scheme. And we've got the funding sources at the moment that are by programs, and they're very disparate. But actually, in reality, you plan your activities around the place. So we have got places where we've got a focus on a number of activities, but you have to bring all the different funding sources together to get the full benefit of that. And it's one of the ways that we we have a plethora of funding, and we're trying to bring all this together to make sense of it. And that is what we do. It would be great if we didn't have to have ring fence pots, and, you know, we could identify a place and identify the priorities for that. But at the moment, we get our funding in programs, and we report progress by program as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different investment going into different localities.
Thank you for that. I think it'd be really good to maybe just see a snapshot of that in the papers, where you can actually just get a snapshot of what other things that does this relate to, so that we get a feel for that level of sort of joined upness, if we like, if there is such a word.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
And I think that'd be really useful. And I think Helen, I think it was next, and then Tamsin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, the point you just made is the point I was going to make, that actually it'd be really helpful to place the bids in that context, so we could see how things were joining up and how it was achieving that place transformation. But also, and I don't know if this is possible, I was thinking about that in terms of the transport ones in particular, whether there were scheme designs, you know, the drawings, the architect's drawings that we could see to give a visual representation of what the transformation would look like. Because I think, again, that would help people who aren't involved in the detail to actually vision it, picture it. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Tamsin.
Thank you. I guess it goes without saying, the value of a secure, affordable home is huge as well. I just wanted to make that point in terms of people's life chances and opportunity. But for me, just coming back to I think, Amir, your comment earlier about geospatial and mapping, I think there's a huge amount here, and just reflecting on all the papers today, a number of different initiatives, place-based initiatives. And I think, you know, from Homes England perspective, we've had conversations in the past and done some mapping in terms of where we've invested. And I think a joined up approach in terms of looking across both organisations and beyond, actually, in terms of where are we investing, not just in the physical, but as Sam has rightly said, in much more than just the homes themselves, but across a number of initiatives, I think would be really helpful. Obviously, we've got spatial priority areas in West Yorkshire, and that's really helpful as well. But to see those different investments joining up, and then as we think about the future pipeline, I think is a really helpful thing to do.
Well, I do have to declare an interest. I do have a geospatial mapping business, so I should point that out. But I do have to stress that, you know, the findings that we are seeing when we start to layer different demographics, different facilities, different infrastructures, and different service provisions is really profound. And we've got some phenomenal insights. So I mean. I just think it's really powerful when you start to overlay all of these different activities, and I think it can help to consolidate things. Sorry, Sam.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, just a quick, and this is a question, and again, this might be a naive question, and good, thanks. I mean, I've got a real good sense that, you know, we are talking about place transformation now, not only building houses and public transport networks, so that's really good. My naive question is, what influence do we have in the families that take ownership of our shared ownership and buy-to-let properties, to make sure that they're the families that you know, that need this good quality accommodation most, rather than families that would be nice to have?
In terms of equalities, each of the organisation has to show how they will advertise or promote their organisation in terms of, because this is a registered provider, we have a copy of their equality plans, and so basically we know that they are just and fair and offer it out in a manner that's there. If it was specialist, if it was adapted accommodation, then they'd focus in on those protected characteristics of those ones in particular, but otherwise it's generally open and without discrimination.
Brilliant, thank you. And Helen?
Just in response to that as well, Sam, all of the housing associations work very closely with their local authority partners and rehouse people from the common registers, and also apply local connections to the sale of low-cost home ownership, because that's part of the point of low-cost home ownership, is it helps local people stay in areas where maybe they wouldn't be able to stay otherwise.
No, that's really helpful, thanks. I mean, Mia knows this. You know, I've been involved in social housing developments in previous lives, but what I didn't realise was that all our properties here funded through this go through housing associations. Is that right? Or how?
Sorry, no. The Brownfield Housing Fund is open to council, registered providers, private sector organisations.
So right across the board.
Yes, it's the whole spectrum. Yes.
Okay, but we can put, you know, we can have access to their equality things, even though we can't put stipulations in any contract type.
For example, there is another scheme that is going through the assurance process, and we've actively influenced them to do affordable, where originally they didn't have to do affordable. Depending on where they are in the planning process, and of course due to viability issues, sometimes it isn't, and it also depends on the council what they're wanting to produce in that area as well. So where we can influence, we do try our best to, but we only have a certain parameter that we can work in.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to ask naive questions.
Oh no, no such thing. It's really helpful. I mean, I think just on the you know, the point around, you know, the criteria. I mean, I do think that I think there's two issues. One is around the call for projects, and I think it's really, really, really important that call for projects does indeed attract the broadest possible range of participants, because, you know, I think that's the only way that we're going to really make sure we end up having the money directed into, I think, maybe the most impactful schemes, rather than what happened to apply. And the other point was, you know, when I looked back earlier at you know, the Brownfield Housing Fund was 66 million, which was designed for or aimed for 4,500 homes, which, when I did the calculation, was about £12,000 per home as a subsidy. And I know that from my experience in this area, you know, most of the challenged parts of this region, that's just simply not enough. So we're really in a position potentially of spreading it too thinly, so that we really maybe help borderline cases that are potentially would have got there anyway, but the ones that are really underwater, and I could name you lots, that they don't have enough, that's just not enough money to help them. So I think that's something that those two points. But Melanie, please.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to come back in on the call for projects, because we have done one call for projects, but partners will probably be aware that there was an announcement in the Levelling Up white paper last week that there is further funding through the Brownfield Housing Fund, and West Yorkshire looks to get approximately 22 million, which is great news. That said, I think the criteria for the funding will be exactly the same as we have now. So it will not give us any more flexibility, but there will be a further opportunity to fund more.
Yeah.
So it's quite likely that we will have a second call for projects as well, now that we have this further allocation. We're still waiting to hear the details of how many additional units we would be expected to support with that funding. And hopefully they may tell us that we can put in more investment per unit. But I suspect that given everything else is the same as we currently have, it's quite likely to be the same. But we're progressing this, and we will be very keen to have another call for projects as well.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you. And is that everything? Does anyone else have any comments?
That's everything on that first one. We have a second Brownfield Housing Fund scheme, haven't we?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's another Brownfield Housing Fund scheme in Pontefract. This is an FBC, and again, due to commercial sensitivities, this paper is exempt. The FBC is seeking funding to support the creation of 37 new affordable homes, and the scheme also includes associated landscaping works and car parking provision. The scheme is located in walking distance of a bus station and 2 train stations, so it's in an area that should promote the active travel. And the investment, although represents, depending on which papers, at a low level, so an acceptable level of value from under the terms of the Brownfield Housing Fund, it is recommended for approval to proceed to delivery stage.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on that one? I think a lot of the comments from the earlier one.
It's a similar scheme, yes.
To this, so I'm assuming that everything applies from that one. And
yeah, it's an affordable. It just meets the affordability under the government rules of what can be achieved for the BCR of 1. So it just scrapes over the BCR of 1. Basically, that's not our rules. That is what DLUC have set us.
Right. Okay. Right, excellent. Okay, well, in that case, I think we can move on to agenda item 7. And Melanie, who's going to be?
Yeah,
Fiona again?
Fiona is going to take us through the TCF program review, and where we talked previously about getting building funds and about there being very tight timescales. Transforming Cities Fund was also very tight timescales for an award of £317 million in infrastructure investment. So Fiona is going to take us through where we are on this one, and the good news that we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of where we spend in terms of this programme and when we spend the funding. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so the programme review paper will provide an update on progress and key risks and issues that we've been managing. Changes to the funding regime, which a positive step forward, and an update to specific project milestones and costs. So in terms of progress, despite significant challenges since the last programme review in June last year, some really good progress has been made. So 2 projects have started construction sites, that Halifax Bus Station and Leeds City Centre Cycle Improvements projects. Several of the large projects are completing detailed design and full business case activity, including purchase of land and some early enabling works, for example, statutory undertakers diversions, which are necessary to progress the schemes. And they also have necessary statutory permissions in place to proceed. A couple of examples of these are the Leeds Rail Station Mission Gate scheme and also York Station Gateway. Work continues to look at opportunities to accelerate and bring projects forward in phases where there's benefits to doing so, to try and move the programme forward at an increased rate than currently. In the report, it shows that over half of the programme is now in the later stages of development or delivery. Whilst it might look like some projects are delayed without outline business cases yet to be completed, what this doesn't show, it kind of masks the work that's been done in the background to progress the projects. And we are working with our partners to take a bit more time in this early stage of development, the outline business case stage, to provide more certainty around project scope, design, quality and costs. So when you come forward at that crucial decision-making point, that we have that clarity about what the project will deliver and how much it's going to cost us and its benefits. We're also taking more time to carry out more detailed and more proactive public and stakeholder engagement to make sure that the schemes that do come forward are supported and won't hit the buffers later down the line in the later stages and not be supported. Over the last period, there's been a phenomenal amount of work on engagement activity undertaken in challenging circumstances with the ongoing pandemic restrictions, with all bar 2 of the TCF's 34 projects having undertaken at least 1 round of public consultation and engagement. And it's expected that there'll be significant further activity over the first half of this year, where every effort will be made to engage with the communities that will benefit from the schemes to help shape them, with a focus on engaging those with protected characteristics, more seldom heard groups. We continue to work with our partners on this, and we want to work on, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. So yeah, we're focusing on engagement with our communities. We continue to work with our partners on resourcing, as well as providing direct support through some secondment arrangements from CA staff into local authorities, and also directly delivering projects ourselves. We've recently procured a new professional services framework to ensure that the right specialist resources are available to all our partners across the programme easily. As we mentioned, Transforming Cities programme is benefiting from the new City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, as well as providing new funding to provide authority gaps and other funding streams, including Transforming Cities. It'll fund the final tranche of the Department's Transport grant for the programme. This brings with it some flexibilities, as it is a 5-year settlement, which means the delivery timescales schemes in West Yorkshire are a little bit more flexible, alongside the committed gain share funding that also has timescales. So previously, we were expected to spend all that Department of Transport funding by March 2023. However, that's now wrapped into a 5-year settlement. For those schemes in North Yorkshire, and we've seen one of those come forward today in the shape of Selby, we have been working separately with the department to agree a position, and it's looking quite positive that the funding for those projects will be secured with an element of flexibility to those delivery timescales as well. The details of this will be confirmed in due course. We're aware that through the new funding regimes, there is also greater expectations on Transforming Cities projects to deliver against government's expectations of design and delivery of high quality schemes. We're expected to meet guidance around cycling and walking infrastructure, but also the National Bus Strategy. And to reflect on this, we've been developing our quality management processes and working closely with our partners to ensure that the schemes that do come forward are aligned to these objectives and will meet government expectations. And that just goes back to that, taking the time at the earliest stages to get the schemes right. This is in advance of the new Active Travel England body, so we're confident that we'll be able to react positively to this new inspection regime when it comes forward. Moving on to some of the challenges. Whilst there have been some significant challenges to the delivery of the programme during this ongoing pandemic, so the programme's almost 2 years, the pandemic's almost 2 years old. The funding was announced to be about a week before we went into lockdown. We're working hard to overcome these challenges and mitigate the impact. And some of the challenges have been around resource availability and continuity, including the procurement of external resources, timely decision making, innovation and how we engage. So we have been engaging virtually through Zoom and other virtual mechanisms. However, we're really looking forward to being able to resume face-to-face consultation and engagement with the public, because there's only a certain audience you can reach through virtual. As we've discussed previously, recent and ongoing cost increases due to inflation is something that we'll need to work and manage closely over the coming months. We have a limited budget overall, and we need to really keep an eye on those costs as they move forward. and also understanding the impact of national policy decision making and responding to these changes. So a number of our schemes obviously got interfaces with the rail network, and there was obviously a recent announcement around the future of the rail network in the region. So we've undertaken the programme review initiated in November, and we're looking at key milestones, finances and risks. We've engaged with partners to review if there's also a need for any more fundamental changes to their projects, changes to scope, phasing or even pausing of projects. However, there isn't any come forward at this time. However, that doesn't rule us out for future reviews. There may need a more comprehensive review of the scope of the programme in the future. And I'll just refer you to Appendix A. So there's 2 appendices that go with the report. Appendix A sets out the project costs, sets out their current indicative approvals and anticipated combined authority programme costs, and an indication of potential future costs or budget requirements. At this stage, the programme is affordable within its overall budget allocation of 457 million. However, the amount of risk and contingency being held at the programme level is reducing over time as projects come forward for approvals, and therefore it's very important that this is actively managed and further reviews are undertaken on a regular basis. At this stage, the costs noted in the second to right column headed future indicative funding requirements are only for noting at this stage, and any decisions on future indicative project budgets will come through the normal assurance framework capital approvals process and through the exceptional circumstances process as detailed in the report. In line with other combined authority programmes, the combined authority incurs overheads for managing the delivery of the programme, and these are now being captured at a project level and are capped at 3%. These costs are recommended for approval at this time and have details on a project by project basis in the appendix with the costs in bold. The current spend forecast for the overall programme is detailed in Table 1, which is therefore forecast that there'll be a spend of 129 million across the programme in the next financial year. And this is a result of quite a number of large projects moving into the delivery phase as detailed in Appendix B. Appendix B sets out that each of the projects and their anticipated key milestones in the assurance framework. And as now we have the flexibility in the delivery timescales afforded through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement funding and our local gain share contribution, it's now recommended that the milestones across the programme are re-baselined, dates in the column highlighted in yellow and bold in Appendix B, and it's these dates that we are recommending for approval at this time. So in terms of the recommendations of the report, it's just to note the content of the report and also to approve both the key milestones and the costs that are highlighted in bold.
That's brilliant, Fiona. Thank you very much. There was a marathon session there, so well done. Just a point on the public consultation, and just to say, I was actually involved in a public consultation for the Brownfield one with a group of stakeholders in the city centre, and it did appear that there was a lot of development work that had been done by the time we were consulted with, and we had major stakeholders like Bradford Live and NEC and people that have got sort of major interest in the area. And it felt like the design and things had progressed, and now it was almost going to say, well, actually, these certain things don't work or don't work as well as they could have done, and so on. So I do think that consultation element is really important, and just in particular the seldom heard groups. I'd be really interested just to hear how exactly you are reaching into those sort of seldom heard groups. Melanie, see your hands up.
Yeah, if I could just come back on the first point about, how far developed do the schemes need to be when we consult with groups. It's a really interesting one because there needs to be enough information to have something to comment on. Yes. So sometimes we will go out early on a consultation on what we call concept designs. So we'll set out a rough idea of what we're going to do. But if we have the information to hand when we're going to do the consultation, then we prefer to bring an early design of that scheme, and then it can still be amended and influenced by that consultation. So there are various stages at which we can consult and get some meaningful feedback from people, but it's trying to get that balance, because the earlier you go, the less information you've got to share, and therefore the less concrete feedback you get on things, because it's too vague, and people therefore don't comment on it if they feel it's too vague. It's a balancing act. But I don't know if Fiona wants to come back on the seldom heard groups and some of that consultation work.
Yeah, sure. So we're fortunate within the Transforming Cities programme that we do have a dedicated communications and engagement team, and that team works closely with the local authority partners to support them in their stakeholder mapping and engagement. We have been challenged during pandemic in trying to reach those groups that don't necessarily engage in kind of more traditional consultation processes. So over the next period, we will be working even more closely with the local authority partners who have those networks and understand how those groups operate and how we can engage better with them at a project level.
Thank you. And is there any other questions? Does anyone else have any questions? Sam.
Thanks, Chair. I just wonder, as well as I'm just thinking about, really trying to engage with seldom heard or underserved communities, as well as working with our local authority partners. I'm just wondering whether the voluntary and community sector might be the key to unlocking some of those conversations. So, we have a really strong voluntary and community sector in West Yorkshire who are often working with the groups that the public sector find it really hard to engage with. And, there are some plans to be developing West Yorkshire Voluntary Sector Assembly, which will give some, more cohesiveness to the approach. And I just wonder whether, I think it would be, worthwhile thinking about how we can engage with that sector in terms of our consultation and engagement activities for our programmes.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions or any other points? No? Okay, well then I think we can move on to agenda item 8. And who's bringing that one forward?
The forward plan. So Alison is going to introduce this one, and it's an opportunity to share with you the policy areas that we'd like to discuss with you. Our meeting today has been quite dominated by looking at capital approvals and individual projects, but we want to discuss policy issues as well. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie, and thanks, Chair. So yeah, I suppose we're trying to move you on here from project-specific approvals to a strategic forward look. So let's see if we can all adjust our mindsets in a short space of time. But so item 8 on the agenda is a paper on the forward plan for the year ahead. So it's on page 115 in the pack if you're struggling to find it. As you're aware, the role of the committee is to support and enable and provide scrutiny and progress on place, regeneration and housing policy and development. And programme delivery. So all of your meetings will take standing items on delivery updates and capital approvals, and today's agenda has been focused on those. But it's also proposed that in addition, we will take policy items themed around areas of influence of the committee to ensure that you've got the opportunity to lead on that policy development. So paragraph 2.2 sets out proposed areas to cover in your agendas for the year ahead. So those are brownfield land and regeneration, one public estate and repurposing of land, securing design quality, inclusivity through design, affordable housing delivery and housing retrofit, spatial priority areas and delivery models, and that one sort of speaks to the debate that we had earlier around place-based investment, and then digital infrastructure. So I suppose today we're just grateful for your views on that list. Is there anything missing that you would expect to see on there? Are there items that are more of a priority for you than others? And then also useful to know if there are things that committee members have a particular interest in that you want to help steer or shape one of these items. Because we've got lots of options about how we can bring those to committee for discussion. We can invite private speakers or focus on pipeline development or spotlight some of our current schemes or schemes across the partnership. So yeah, just useful for a bit of feedback and input on how you would like us to shape the agendas going forward. So I'll pass back to you, Amir, for any comments. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got lots, but I will wait and I'll invite others in first. Helen, I saw your hand go up first, and then Tamsin, I'll come to you.
Thanks, Amir, and thanks, Alison. I was wondering whether now that we've got the levelling up white paper, whether we could have a paper, probably, I don't know if it's possible to the next meeting, given that it's quite current, around the implications of that for our region, and maybe what possible future funding streams there may be and how that all links together with the work of this committee. I would find that quite useful. Also, Fiona mentioned earlier about professional services framework, and we've talked previously at this committee about capacity issues that actually place obstacles in the way of progressing some schemes. So again, I was wondering whether maybe we could talk about capacity building and what we're doing around that, and where we may be able to do more. And in terms of your approach, yes, having examples or guest speakers would be really helpful. And if it helps in terms of the affordable housing delivery and retrofit, the partnership, West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, would be happy to make a contribution to a meeting.
Brilliant. Thank you. Do you want to come back on any of that, Alison, now, or shall we ask for the other questions, then you can come back at the end if you can remember them all, or it's up to you?
That's fine. I can come back on that one. So I think that's great. I've noted those two, and I'll have a think about how we weave those into a forward plan. Yes, we're obviously working on the levelling up white paper implications anyway. That's quite live, so I think that would be great to bring something to this to the next meeting. And then that's great. I've noted your interest in terms of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, and I think some of our joint work in that space will be great to bring to this committee.
Brilliant. And then I'll go to Tamsin and then Sam and then to Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the agenda going forward. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about some of these policy or the policy space in this meeting at this strategic level. From a Homes England perspective, absolutely support what Helen has just said there, in terms of if there's anything that we can do as well to support you in bringing things to the meeting, please do let us know. It'd be good to join up on some of these things. And I think for me, I guess that speaks to what's when we do discuss these topics at these future meetings, I think it'd be really helpful to have that evidence base behind the conversation to support it. So having really well-informed discussions, I think will be brilliant. Also, again, second Helen's point around capacity and skills. I think there's a real opportunity here through the Combined Authority to link up the skills agenda. We've spoken about it at a number of meetings as well, in terms of some of the challenges. So yeah, I think there's a real space there around capacity and skills.
Brilliant. Alison, I'll let you come back on that one if you want.
That's great, thank you. Welcome your comments. I've sort of noted the priorities, yeah, and that's fine. I think in particular, I think it would be really great to collaborate, Tamsin, on the sort of spatial priority areas and the delivery models. And again, the conversation that we had earlier around place-based investment, I think it would be good to put an agenda together around that, particularly with yourselves.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sam?
Thanks. This isn't a very well-formed thought, but I think it's really useful. I think we'll see. This is a great list of things. You know, the what's that we want to discuss, Alison. It's really comprehensive, and I think that addition of the placemaking thing is really good. I wonder if also a conversation, either as part of each meeting or as a single agenda item, about the how we're working as well. I'm just thinking, we've talked a lot about how we make sure our investments are contributing to sustainable placemaking. We've talked about how we can make sure that our underserved communities get most or equal benefit from our investments. How we're making sure we're inclusive, how we're making sure things are joined up. And I just wonder if there's something. If there's something in that that might be helpful, and we might be able to show the rest of the LEP and the WICA structure, the way forward. I don't know what people think.
No, I fully agree with that. I think the how is the big the big challenge, and I think sometimes it's easy to get the low-hanging fruit and miss sort of some of the really big challenges, and especially where we've got an inclusive growth agenda that's really at the heart of everything that we're supposed to be doing. Then I think ensuring that how does capture that, I think, is really important. But I don't know, Alison, if you want to come back on anything there.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's great, and I think it's missing from that list. So yeah, thank you. I think we can involve our strategy team probably in some of the preparation for that, and give you a sort of overview of what we're currently doing, and then it's an opportunity, isn't it, to discuss and challenge and see where we could improve. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Sam.
Excellent. And Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. I thought it was a useful list. I immediately thought environmental things were missing from it, and then I went on down the page to item 3. I actually think there's a difference, and it might be helpful in the development and maturity of this committee to just think about this in the agendas going forward. I think there are a number of things in that list which are factual. They're about information and briefing. You know, the suggestion about let's be briefed on the Levelling Up Fund and the various other funds that are coming. I think there are informative things that we should try and do as part of that, having a strategic sense of, you know, what's in front of us coming down the line. I think also in that list, and separately for me, is having themes or lenses or perspectives through which you view things. And it comes back to what Sam just said, you know, that there is the environmental and sustainability perspective. Be useful sometimes to just use that lens, the inclusion perspective, and particularly post-COVID recovery. And then I think there's the other one, that the placemaking lens, you know, for our cities, towns and communities, 15-minute communities or whatever. So I think there's a combination in there of information briefing things that's helpful in terms of the committee understanding its role more than just approving projects and moving them along. But I think there's also times when we might want to take a particular lens and look at what we're doing in relation to those particular themes. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. If I can just follow on from that, just to say that I think the regeneration area is one that I think is absolutely critical. But I think there is, if we're going to sort of take this step back sort of view and have this overview, I think that in my experience of this region, we've got areas that economically work. You've got engaged people that live there. You've got inward investment coming into those areas. You've got, you know, a lot of social and economic impact happening. And you've got other areas that are completely the opposite. And I think that there ought to be some specific understanding around how exactly we target and uplift those areas that are not, because at the moment it appears we've got one sort of approach to everything. But I think we've got, you know, we need to level up within our own region. And I think that, you know, the idea of understanding what's already on the ground in those areas that are more challenged, what's already working, who's doing what with whom, and some of those voluntary organisations and so on. So to take this asset-based approach within those areas and to really use them as a mechanism to strengthen them. I think we need a particular strategy for how those areas are uplifted and how they become economically more viable. And I talk about the private sector a lot because I see the private sector being very, very, very interested and capable of putting money in. I'm also connected, I just sort of on an aside, to an institutional pension fund. And they've got a lot of interest and desire to be involved in sort of very long-term projects that you know, these are not connected to government funding. They're totally independent. So I do think that there's an opportunity for us to sort of just try and derive a package of things around those areas that are more challenged. I don't know if there's any other comments, and yeah, Councillor Scullion's had to leave. But yeah, I would say if there's no more comments, according to my papers, that's the end of it. So I think, Melanie, I can draw this meeting to a close. Is that correct?
You can, and thank you very much, Amir, for stepping in at the very last minute.
I have to say, I quite enjoyed that.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for your time, and thank you for being so understanding with my chairing capability.